Leila Dehghan was born in Iran. She earned her medical degree from the University of Vienna and worked as a medical doctor in the UK. Leila has also earned a master's degree in clinical and public health nutrition with distinction from the University College of London and is currently education lead at Plant-Based Health Professionals UK and is a nutritionist at Plant-Based Health Online. And thank you so much for being here today, Leila.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it. And I love hearing people's vegan story. And you have a good one. Can you share that with us?
Sure. Well, I have been actually vegetarian on and off since first year of medical school. And I don't know about other people, but when I stopped eating red meat and chicken, and I was just eating it once in a while, gradually I lost my taste for animal products. So even now, anything that tastes too much like animal products, actually I cannot have it. So beyond burger, all this Impossible Burger, I haven't even tried that because I know that would make me actually sick. Anyway, in 2013, I got involved in animal rescue, mainly rescuing and rehoming dogs from Romania and later Bosnia. And at the time, I thought, great, I'm already vegetarian, so I'm not harming any animals. But then one day I came across a video on Facebook, and I watched it. And as soon as I found out the truth about the dairy industry, I simply couldn't have it anymore. And I'm a very spiritual person, and I believe whatever we do carries a certain energy. So I didn't want to consume something that comes with the energy of suffering and pain. And so, yes, after watching that video, I went vegan then and there. And although, I say I went vegan overnight, I should add that I was never really into cheese, for example. I only like the soft, creamy cheese. And somebody recently told me that that's not really considered cheese anyway. And I don't know why, but for some reason, I had already stopped eating eggs. And I didn't even like fish anymore. So I was still having them, mixed and disguised in other foods, but I wouldn't have them on their own. So maybe that made it actually easier for me to just give up all these animal products and go vegan. All I had to do was just, stop drinking cow's milk. So I went vegan. And, I think when you go vegan for the animals, the way you look at life changes. You start paying more attention to all the products you use. Every year I discover something new, like toothpastes are not always vegan, or, even shampoos. And, you always find something new. So you have to make adjustments and changes. It has been a journey, but, I've never looked back. And to be honest, I don't even get those ex-vegans who say, they used to be vegan, they used to be vegans for animals, and now they are eating animals again. Once you know about the cruelty, how can you be part of it? How can you actually go back? I really don't get it.
No, there's no going back. And because the body just feels so much healthier too, right?
That's true. Yeah. Yes, definitely. Yes.
Yeah. And so when you were in medical school, did you learn about lifestyle nutrition there?
I'm sure you have heard many doctors saying that we don't get any or very little education in nutrition. And in my case, I grew up in Vienna, so I studied medicine in Vienna. And we didn't really have any formal education in nutrition at all. And whatever I learned, it was kind of informal as part of another module. And the interesting part was that, whenever we learned about any of their chronic diseases and what was actually causing those diseases, we would read that lifestyle and diet played a role. And when I look back now, I realized nobody actually asked how and why, how did actually lifestyle and diet affect those diseases and how can we change that? And so, yes, we didn't really learn much about it, which is a shame because, knowing what I know now, knowing that, plant foods can actually have a huge impact on all these chronic, conditions. It is a shame, I think, medical schools, but not just even medical schools. I did my master's degree at here, a master's degree in nutrition. And even although it was a nutrition degree, they didn't discuss plant-based diets. So I think it's really a shame, schools, colleges, universities, they need to talk about plant-based diets and the role that animal products have actually in causing all these chronic diseases. I mean, for example, if we just look at myself, I used to suffer from migraine, and I had really horrible migraine. And actually, that was the reason why I had to give up medicine, because of my chronic migraines. Wow. And whenever I went to see doctors, and I really saw a lot of doctors over the years, some of them mentioned that diet played a role. So, it is almost like healthcare professionals know that diet does play a role, but nobody knows how. And there was no real guidance on, what foods to avoid, what to eat more of. And I remember a doctor suggested that I experiment. And he said, maybe chocolate or onions can actually trigger my migraines. So I remember I stopped actually eating chocolates and onions for 6 months, and there was no change in my migraines. And, I wish someone would have told me that actually a whole food plant-based diet could cure my migraines, because that is what happened to me. Once I switched from my diet, I used to be a junk food vegan. I had a lot of bad food. So once I actually changed my diet to a whole food plant-based diet, my migraines disappeared. So, and if I would have known that earlier, that would have really made a huge impact on my life. That would have changed my life. And I know there are many people like myself who suffer from chronic conditions that can actually be reversed or prevented, on a plant-based diet. So I really hope that one day, it is part of the curriculum, at universities.
Or at least acknowledging that, as a medical doctor, I don't have this skill set, but let me refer you to a nutritionist who has studied nutrition medicine, because there's a whole school of knowledge there as well. Like, we can't expect our doctors to know everything, right? But we could have specialists, and we do in Canada, our health system, I think the British health system too, you get referred to a specialist, right? So I don't see why they couldn't refer to a nutrition specialist.
Yes, I think it's also just because it's not taken seriously. Even when I was studying nutrition, I remember one of my tutors said, if you want to, for example, change your diet and create a change to your diet, it would take months. And I was sitting there, I didn't say anything, but I was thinking, actually, it took me just 5 days to get rid of my migraines. Honestly, it was like I remember on Monday, I started my whole food plant-based journey. And then 5 days into the, eating that way, I didn't have any more headaches and migraines. So it was a matter of days. Right. And I think it is just, nobody really believes that, because it is really very simple if you think about it. We eat 3 times a day. So 3 times a day, we have actually the chance to make a real change in our lives. And it is just, in a way, too simple, too easy to be true. So nobody wants to believe it. And also, I think, there are some industries that actually kind of probably profit from it. If you tell people go and buy vegetables, that's too cheap. And again, it is just, yes, there's a whole lot about that to say, but let's leave it here.
Well, I think, and so what if even if it did take months, if out of a lifetime, right? If you can really change the way that you're living, the quality of life, if a few months investment is going to do that, why not, right? And I like to think of it as like fuel in the car. If you put fuel in your car that has water in it, for example, I don't mean to make water out to be a bad thing, but it's not what the car needs. Exactly. It's going to make a significant difference right away in how the car is reacting, right? And yeah, it's interesting that eating is just something we kind of automatically do without really even thinking about it. And that's one thing I love about being vegan, is I really think about everything, like you say, like all the shampoos and the soaps and all my purchases now. I'm much more conscious of what I'm participating with. Yeah. Do you think there's influence from, meat and dairy? Like, I know that doctors, we've all, mostly in this generation, we've been brought up with kind of meat and dairy and eggs. And so there's that. It's just something that we do. But I'm wondering, in medical school, do you think there's additional kind of influence from the corporations to promote this kind of eating?
I don't know, to be honest. Again, because I studied in Vienna, I didn't feel like there was any additional kind of influence from them. But maybe I was just blind to it because I was just one of them. Right. I mean, I remember when I actually went vegetarian, I felt like, oh, I still had to eat meat. I thought it was the normal thing to do, to eat meat. So that's why I was vegetarian on and off, because I would actually force myself to eat meat. So I think it is just, we are so brainwashed to believe that we need meat. It's part of being normal, being a human being. So nobody actually really thinks about it. And I think when we talk about, if you change your diet and it takes a while, when you have a chronic disease like myself, actually I spent a whole year in medical school just in bed with pain.
Oh, wow.
And I just think, sure, even if it was taking, just 3 months, I would happily change my diet and wait for the diet actually to take effect.
Right.
If I knew about it. So I actually lost a lot of time just in pain in bed. So, and that's why whenever somebody tells me, oh, what you eat, it's so boring, because I actually follow a no oil, whole food, plant-based diet. First of all, it's not boring.
Oh.
I'm sure you know that. There's so much out there. So it's so delicious. But to be honest, for me, being healthy, being able to do what I want to do, because, I had actually to change my job. I had to change actually my plans, my dreams. So no food is worth it, So I think we just don't see the hidden cost of eating that way, that unhealthy way. So yes,
yeah,
it's sad.
Yeah, and let's shift a little bit to talk about the global majority. I love that term. That's a really great way of thinking about ethnicity in our world rather than people of color, because I think white people like to believe we're the majority, but in fact we are not. We are not, and we have a lot to learn from each other. So before we get into kind of the social implications of food and poverty and that sort of thing, I'm just curious about your cultural food. You were brought up with particular cultural food, and one of my favorite online sites, I'm not sure if you're Arab, but it's called One Vegan Arab, and I never grew up with some of those foods, but I've tried some and they're absolutely delicious. So, are we sort of, as white people especially, are we kind of challenging ethnicity by encouraging veganism? Is it considered an affront to suggest that people might consider veganizing their traditional foods, or how is that received, do you think?
Well, I think, when we say veganizing a food, what we are really saying is we should just replace the animal product with a plant. And I think we don't realize that. We are not asking anybody to change a recipe as such. And people, even in the West, whenever we veganize a meal, we try to create the same flavor. So we are not really changing the food as such. And so I don't think it is racist at all. But I do understand when people feel threatened, because our identity is really tied to our cultural foods. I mean, as I mentioned, when I first went vegetarian, I felt actually I'm betraying my culture by not eating kebabs, especially kebabs, because eating kebab on a Friday, that is, like Friday is equivalent to Sundays. It's a huge tradition having kebab with rice. So I would actually force myself to have kebab once in a while, so that I would feel like, I'm still being loyal to my culture. Obviously now I know there is vegan kebab, so I can still actually kind of be true to my culture and be vegan. And I think there's nothing wrong with actually saying we can veganize any dish, and we can. And if you look at social media, yes, I know the one Arab vegan, I know her, she has really amazing recipes. And, there are so many other chefs on social media who are veganizing their traditional foods. There is somebody from Iran, Korea, Japan, Lebanon. I actually once made a list of all the possible kind of, chefs who veganize their own traditional foods. So it is possible, and it's also much easier than most people think. Now, having said that, I think the problem starts when white vegans, white chefs try to veganize their traditional foods of other cultures. I think that is when the problem starts, because when they do that, what they are saying is that they kind of know better than us how to veganize our traditional foods, the foods that we have actually grown up with, foods that our grandmothers, our aunts have prepared for us. So when they do that, that is the problem, and it is disrespectful, and it can come across as racist. So I think that is where the problem starts. But just saying, veganize all your traditional foods, there's nothing wrong with that.
Right. So it's okay for me in my home to try different foods from different cultures and eat them myself. But if I start selling those and then that becomes a problem for sure. Yeah,
Yes.
I
I
get
think
that.
that is, you said it quite well. I think that people usually say, oh, but I make it at home. There's nothing wrong with making, I don't know, tacos, curries, or whatever you make at home. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you actually take that and make it into your business and you make money out of it, then you are taking away the chance of a person from that culture to make money, and have a business. And what we see most of the time is that actually, if a white chef does that, veganize another culture's food, they can actually create a very good business and be successful. Whereas when a person from that culture does the same thing, it's not received that well. So that is where the problem starts. That's when we talk about food appropriation, and it's not right, it's cultural appropriation. We should stop doing that. But at home, by all means, we do a lot of it's fine. We want to try and try new recipes, try new foods, and that's fine.
Right. Yeah. Because I can't afford necessarily to go to a restaurant, and definitely when I go to an Indian restaurant that's owned by Indian people, there's no comparison. There's no white person can make that same kind of food. So I'm definitely going to go there. But for people of lower income, we can buy the ingredients, right, and watch one of those videos and experiment, and it's kind of fun that way. So when you talk about, us, how we can unite around healthy food choices, the global majority and the global minority. Do you want to expand on what you mean by that?
Well, when I talk about global majority, I didn't obviously invent the term. I love it. I think it is really good. I actually first read about it on Encompass. I don't know if you know about them. They are doing really great job at actually bringing vegans of global majority together. And the difference between saying global majority and a person of color is that, when we say person of color, we are actually identifying an individual based on the color of their skin. And by doing so, we are making whiteness the default, the norm. And the person of color is the other. And also there are people like myself who are actually fair-skinned. I used to be growing up, I was kind of very white, and my friends would always make fun of my skin color. But I guess it was also because I was, as a vegetarian, I was always deficient in iron. I was looking anemic, so that's why I was probably white. Anyway, so the term person of color was confusing for me. And interestingly enough, last year, during the BLM movement, I posted something about BLM, and then I received a message on social media, and somebody told me I should keep quiet because I'm white. So you see what I mean? When we say person of color, we automatically think of the skin color. So that can be a problem. But I think the main problem is that we make actually the whiteness, the white skin color, the norm, the dominant. And by saying, people of a global majority, as you mentioned, we actually remind ourselves that we are not a minority. We actually make up the majority. And the term can be very empowering and inclusive. And I think it's also very important for people of the global majority to come together and have spaces where we are together and we can share our experiences with each other, because we have different lived experiences. And a lot of times when I talk to white people, they don't have the same lived experience, and they don't understand the impact of microaggressions and discriminations that we face every day. But when I'm talking to people of global majority, I'm not afraid of actually showing emotions, because I know they understand my emotions. They don't label me as angry. And usually when we say angry, we actually mean aggressive. So I think it's really important to actually, for people of the global majority, to have safe spaces to come together, discuss racism, discrimination. And I think that can actually, again, it is empowering. It gives us a strength and energy to carry on. And I think Encompass, actually, you really need to look them up. They are doing a very good job at bringing these people together and offering that space to us.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I remember during the BLM, I found Gwenna Hunter at that time.
Yes.
From Vegans for Black Lives Matter. And at some point, her mentioning that, you know, really the most important thing that we can do right now, people who are kind of already consider themselves allies, you know, is just acknowledge our privilege. And I thought, well, you know, I've lived in poverty my adult life, and I don't really have that much privilege. But then I started to really look at it and think back on the opportunities that I've had in my life. And, you know, I've been denied some opportunities, but there's probably some places where I can think, oh, you know, if I wasn't a white person, that would probably have worked out differently, right? So I think it's important for all of us to acknowledge our privilege, and even especially around food, you know, and access to food. And I think you've talked about food deserts. I think is it Glenna, or it's the people at Food Empowerment Project that refer to it as food apartheid areas, which is really kind of a strong description. But what can you explain what those are?
Well, those are areas, and usually in urban, you know, and spaces where people actually don't have access to fresh produce. So in those areas, it's much cheaper actually to buy processed food, you know, like kind of junk food, than actually buying fruits and vegetables. And often people have to travel a long distance to get to supermarkets where they can buy kind of the same, those products for cheaper. But then, you know, when we keep saying, okay, legumes are cheap, that's what a lot of vegans say, you know, vegan food can be very cheap. And it is true, but we need to consider, like, some people may not have access to those cheap products. And one of the things I have heard is that, you know, do I spend that money on actually traveling to that supermarket, or do I use that money to buy food? Mm. And obviously, you know, they're not going to think long term. You know, they are not going to think about, I don't know, the health impact. They just want to eat something now. And also there are so many other issues around it. Like, I actually worked in the community where, you know, poor people would come to us for lifestyle advice. And I remember there was this guy, and I was giving him really good advice, you know, how to eat a healthy diet so that he could lose weight, you know. And I wasn't actually trying to make him go vegan, but I was telling him, look, legumes are cheaper than meat, and it's so easy to cook them. And then he looked at me and he said, I don't have a kitchen. Right. So that was it. All my brilliant advice was useless. So I think, you know, we all need to actually kind of ask the individual and understand their background. You know, do they have access to healthy food? Do they have actually even space in their house? Again, saying, oh, you know, buy in bulk. There isn't no point in buying in bulk when you don't actually have any space in your room, in your house to, you know, store it. And we don't think about all these things. And again, when we let's talk about exercise, for example, we tell people, oh, go and exercise. But not everybody can actually afford going to a gym. And just telling them, okay, go to your local park, or go for a run on the streets, or I don't know, even work out at your home. But, you know, some people, a whole family lives in one single room. And the area they live is not safe for them to go for a run in the park. So it's, I mean, when we give lifestyle advice, I think we really need to look at, they are called, you know, the social determinants of health, the social conditions people live in, and the social conditions they grow up in, like kind of, are they employed? Do they have money? And we always take it for so granted that everybody has access to those things. And I think that is really missing when we are giving lifestyle advice. And especially, again, as vegans, I think, you know, if we really want to create a vegan world, that's what you're trying to do, right? Mm-hmm. And we need to consider all of that, because if we don't, and I'm talking to somebody, and what they are hearing is, this person does not understand me. This person doesn't understand my struggles, my frustrations, and how hopeless I am. And we actually alienate them. They're going to stop actually listening to us. So I think it is really essential for us as vegans to consider the social conditions of a person, you know, the social circumstances, before talking to them about veganism.
Yeah, and do you think that you know, social conditions, access to clean water, food, housing, I mean, that should be a marker of a healthy society, is the ability to provide those things. Like you say, it seems like that needs to be the foundation before we can really start to talk about other aspects of health. If we can't provide those things for people, it's going to be easier for diseases to run through those communities and that sort of thing. But that doesn't seem to be a discussion that I hear much from, for example, governments. They talk about funding healthcare as in building hospitals, for example, but there's so much more to health than just that.
True, and I think that is it. That's why we need actually the government and the policies. That is where change needs to happen. Obviously, we cannot wait for the policies to change. So we try our best to create change in other ways. But real change would happen, at a systemic level when policies change, so that these people have access to, as you mentioned, clean water and good food, healthy food. And it is a big issue, I think, and yes, it will take time. And obviously,
it will, and the more people who are aware of it to begin with, and then perhaps can, lobby our elected officials and that sort of thing. All we have to do is put our mind to it, right? And we could create a more egalitarian world. And I think you've spoken also about the idea of fast food is accessible because it's right there and it's relatively cheap. Well, it's not really in the long run, because it's not very satiating and it produces ill health. But that westernized kind of processed food, fast food, is not just in North America or in the Western world, what we call the Western world anymore. It's really kind of colonizing other parts of the world, isn't it?
Yes, that's actually a good point. And I think that is something I'm really passionate about. I like to actually address it. I don't know how. I don't want to go into the history of colonialism because even countries which were not colonized suffer from this phenomenon. And I think, I'm from Iran, for example, and Iran was never colonized, but we still have the same problem. And the problem is that the West is seen as powerful, as strong, and anything that comes from the West must be good. Mm-hmm. So the fast food, McDonald's, fried kitchen, what is it? Kentucky's chicken. I can't even remember them anymore. Pizza Hut, Burger King, all these fast food establishments are seen as desirable. And people have this colonized mindset, which makes people to adopt the cultures and ideas of the oppressors. And as you mentioned, it is a global problem. So people around the globe actually want to have the same power as the West, or what they perceive that the West has, the same status. So it is this colonized mindset that makes foods, that come from the West attractive. And when you go, for example, to countries like India and China, you see that, there's McDonald's everywhere, Burger King. And, it's interesting. Sometimes those establishments are actually very expensive in those countries. And again, only the rich in those countries can actually afford going to those places and eat. So it is something that only the privileged in those countries can do. And again, it is seen as a symbol of status, a symbol of power. And I think it is an important issue to recognize, because firstly, processed foods are unhealthy. But also as vegans, when we want to advocate a vegan diet, and which is a plant-based diet, and in many of those countries, the traditional diet is actually plant-based or predominantly plant-based. Now they are trying to include more meat, more dairy. In China, it is quite sad because a huge number of the population is actually lactose intolerant, but they're actually trying to introduce cow's milk into their schools. And as far as I'm concerned, that's a step backward. And another thing we see is that in those countries, the consumption of animal products is rising. And as that rises, we see a rise in chronic health conditions such as cancers, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, and all of these diseases are linked to consumption of animal products. And for me, as a nutritionist, but also as a vegan activist and social justice activist, I think it is really saddening that these countries, or many of these countries, are actually turning their back to their traditional diets and trying to replace those with more meat, more processed foods from the West. And it is this colonized mindset And that is what needs to be, to change, really.
Mm-hmm. And it's really based on a myth, it seems to me, because the Western, like Canada and the US, have a tremendous homeless situation, enormous social problems. So the power really is very elusive. And if people really knew what was going on in our communities, I think they would realize we're not actually all that powerful. We're kind of the wizard behind the curtain, but if you pull back the curtain, there's a little bit of a different reality going on here. So now these fast food places are producing vegan options because people are realizing what a wonderful thing it is to be plant-based and vegan. And so, of course, they want to capitalize on that movement. That must be very confusing for people in, for example, China, who go to fast food places for meat, and now suddenly there's vegan options.
It would be actually interesting to see how people react, because I remember when I was in China, there was always some vegetarian option anyway. So they already had a vegetarian option. At the time, I wasn't vegan, so I don't know if it was actually vegan. I didn't look into that. So it would be interesting to see actually how people, they kind of accepted that there should be a vegetarian option. Now, I don't know if they would call it vegan or not. That would be actually, that's a good question. I don't know. Yes.
Yeah. All right. Let's see, what else are we going to talk about? Now, you like to talk about athletes and what they can do for their health. There's a lot of confusion about carbohydrates, it seems to me. And my understanding is there's different varieties of carbohydrates. There's like high quality carbohydrates and really low quality carbohydrates. And the idea of not having carbohydrates is actually not a good idea. Is that right?
Yes. As human beings, we don't even need to talk about athletes. We need to have energy first. Our body actually needs energy to burn, and energy comes from carbohydrates. So actually not having carbohydrates or having too little carbohydrates is not a good idea. And when they talk about like kind of good and bad carbohydrates, what they mean is, complex carbohydrates, unrefined carbohydrates, and the refined processed carbohydrates. And obviously the processed ones, we know. It actually removes all the nutrients, so that's not good. That's the white bread, for example, white rice, all these pastries, that is what we want to avoid. So the complex carbohydrates, there's nothing wrong with that. It should be part of our diet, and especially athletes, they actually...
Can you give some examples of complex carbohydrates?
Brown rice, brown pasta, and sweet potatoes. There are so many actually types of potatoes. There's also white potato, which is still okay. I'm not saying it's bad, but if you can opt for red potatoes or sweet potatoes, it would be even better. But yes, all these are actually complex carbohydrates, and they should be part of our diets.
And I think you were going to start mentioning about athletes.
Yes, the thing is carbohydrates. When we consume carbohydrates, they are actually converted to glucose, and that is what our muscles, our working muscles, and our brain actually utilize. So even our brain actually needs carbohydrates, the glucose. If we are having less carbohydrates in our diet, then our body actually needs to kind of get it from fats or protein, and that's not a good idea, especially for athletes. They eat all this protein thinking that they want to build muscle, but if they haven't actually eaten enough calories, then the body doesn't have enough actually energy. So the body is going to get the energy from proteins. So instead of using that protein to build muscles, that protein is going to be used as energy. So actually I would say the first thing is, are you eating enough calories? And the reason I say carbohydrate is just because our body needs, glucose to work. So that's why, the majority should come from carbohydrates. And then, yes, we need fats. It's essential. We need protein. It's essential for athletes as well who are actually building muscle. But carbohydrates should be the majority of our diet. And I think that's actually one of the good things about a plant-based diet. It is naturally high in carbohydrates. And I think that's one of the reasons why so many athletes are actually turning to a plant-based diet, and they're doing so well on a plant-based diet. That is one of the reasons.
And so plant-based protein is as good as or better than animal-based protein?
well, of course, I would say it is better, but I think I would say that, people are concerned that they are not getting enough protein on a plant-based diet. And then there is this question that are we getting essential amino acids? Because protein is broken down to amino acids, and there are 9 essential amino acids that we actually need to get from our diet. And the problem is that plant proteins do have all the essential amino acids, but in varying proportions. So it could be that one protein might have less of one of the amino acids, but another one will have more of that. So by eating a variety of different plant proteins, we get all the essential amino acids. So getting, the essential amino acids is not a problem. And and we can easily get enough protein, on a plant-based diet, because everything has really protein. And again, the main problem I see actually in people who work out, and even in people who actually just go vegan initially, is plants are low in calorie density. So you can actually have, if you have the same portion, for example, compared to a non-vegan meal, then you're probably eating less calories. So that means you're actually consuming less calories, you're not getting enough. So that's why people say, oh, I went vegan and I feel weak, I don't have any energy. It's just because you're not eating enough food. And if you start eating enough food, then you would get all the protein you need. So I think my advice is to anybody who wants to go plant-based or is plant-based and is feeling like kind of low in energy and lethargic, I would say, look if you're actually eating enough food or not, because plants don't have as many calories as animal products, which is good, which is the reason why a lot of people find it easier to lose weight on a plant-based diet and to maintain their weight. So it's really actually recommended for people who have problems with weight. And look at our society, we do have a problem with obesity and overweight. So that's why it is a good idea actually to change to a plant-based diet. But we also still need to get enough for our various functions in the body. So yes.
I wonder if the sort of diet culture, the idea that, I'm going on a diet in January because I overconsumed in December. And so this idea of kind of always portion control. And then when you shift to a plant-based diet, like you say, you really kind of have to throw that all out the window, because I've heard people say, oh, I tried being plant-based, but I was hungry all the time. And my response is, well, just eat then. That's
exactly.
You get to eat all the time. I find it's more of a grazing. Like I feel better if I just kind of have fruit and nuts through the day. And whenever I'm feeling hungry, there's always kind of a healthy snack available. I feel better doing that personally than the kind of 3 big meals, although I do focus on breakfast and dinner. But does that make sense? Is that a common thing?
Yes, I think people are different. I mean, I have seen athletes, not professional athletes, but amateur athletes who actually do intermittent fasting. So they have a very short window of eating, and they eat sometimes, they need to eat like 4,000, 5,000 calories, and they manage to eat that much calories in 8 hours. So that is possible. So I think people are different, but some people do better actually, like yourself, like you was grazing throughout the day. They prefer that. And I think especially with athletes or anybody who feels like, oh, I cannot eat all the time, I get tired, just have a smoothie. That's what I like about the smoothies. Add anything you don't like, any vegetable you don't like, add it to a smoothie. Or if you need more calories, add some nuts. You mentioned nuts. Nuts are really good. Nut butters, seeds. They have all these healthy nutrients and fats, and they are higher in calories. So if you need actually to eat more calories, and it's an easy way of actually adding it to nuts and seeds and avocados. And again, add it to your smoothies, because it's so much easier to drink your calories than eat them. And I think especially athletes who need to, they need more calories. I always recommend to them, have actually a smoothie. Not if you're trying to lose weight, because then you might be actually consuming more calories than you want to. Again, it is just, we forget that whenever we are drinking, it might not be satisfying, but we're actually consuming a lot of calories.
All right. You mentioned that you're a no oil. I'm also moving into that realm, and I do notice I feel different even after all these years of being vegan. Really reducing the oil has made a big difference. So when you talk about fats, plant-based fats, what's the difference between that and oil?
Fats are an essential macronutrient, but oils are a processed form of fats, let's call it that. in easy terms. So oils are not essential. For example, olive. That's a nice food. You can have it, and it has natural fats. But when you process it, turn it into olive oil, you have removed some of the nutrients. So some people say it is processed, and if you are following a whole food plant-based diet where you are actually trying to avoid processed foods, then you shouldn't have olive oil. So that's the kind of reasoning behind it. For me personally, the reason I'm actually following a no-oil whole food plant-based diet is just when I started changing my diet and I heard about a whole food plant-based diet, I heard of a no-oil whole food plant-based diet, and I really was desperate to do something for my migraines. So I tried that. And then later if I would go out and I would eat something which was really oily, I would get a migraine. So I noticed there is it does cause my migraine. It triggers it, put it that way. So I can't really explain it, but I have met other people who suffer from chronic diseases. And when they remove the oil from their diet, they do better. So I don't usually tell my clients, don't have any oils. But if somebody has, some conditions that they are not getting any better, I would recommend that they try it, at least give it a try. But yes, fats are essential. We need to have fats. I eat nuts and seeds all the time, every day. I love nut butters. And I'm not so much into avocado, but that's again a good source of fat. But oils are not essential.
Well, let's talk about your clients and the work that you're doing then with plant-based health online. Is that somewhere anybody can go and get consultation?
Yes, although at the moment I think we are open. I'm not sure about Canada. We don't accept clients from America, US. I'm not sure about Canada, as I said, but any other country, they can just go onto the website and book an online consultation. It is online. So, and yes, the name says it. We are advocating a plant-based diet, but we are also about the whole lifestyle. So it's a holistic approach rather than just focusing on the nutrition. And we have different, we have doctors, we have dietitians, and myself. And and it is the first of its kind actually in the UK. There is something similar in the US. And yes, I think it is hopefully, it takes on, because I think it is good to actually have a place where people know they come and they can talk to somebody who is promoting a plant-based diet and knows about a plant-based diet. And I think that is something a lot of vegans, struggle with when they go and see their doctors. And the first thing they hear is, whatever problem you have, it doesn't even matter what the problem is. They say, oh, you need to add meat. They don't understand it. And they don't even think if you are anemic, for example, you need to have red meat. They don't even understand that, maybe there are other foods where you can actually get your iron, you don't need to have meat. So I think it's good to have a place where, everybody is vegan, everybody is plant-based, and they know what advice to give you.
Right. Often doctors too will, if you have an illness, the prescription pad comes out first, right? And along with that comes a whole host of side effects. So I think it's perhaps beneficial if, going back to the beginning, if they have at least a basic awareness that there are some things that whole food plant-based diet people will acknowledge a change quite quickly, like high blood pressure. I've heard just blood pressure drops, right? Yeah. So, the doctor still can be involved, because if someone's on health or blood pressure medication, they're going to need a doctor to help them come off of that. So it's not about eliminating the doctor. It's just about acknowledging the limits of their education. And it's interesting that I was thinking about, large cows that we eat, or that people eat, and elephants. These are large, strong animals that do not eat meat to get big and strong, right? So, yeah.
But I think we don't even think about these things. We just see them as food.
Right.
I know I used to do that. Even when I went vegetarian, it wasn't like I thought, oh, that is an animal, I'm eating. It was more like kind of, because I was starting to dissect a human arm, at medical school. And I felt like the arm in front of me, the muscle fibers, just look like the food I'm eating at home. And it was the other way around. I felt like, what I'm eating at home could have been a human flesh. So that's the reason I thought I can't have it anymore.
Wow.
But other people were okay. There were students in this hall there where we were dissecting the human arm. They were actually having the sandwich with meat or anything else. They were fine with it. And I just think we don't make that connection.
Right. Yeah.
But once you have made that connection, everything falls into place. And I just think, why didn't I think about it earlier?
Right. Yeah, the programming is strong. And so thank you for all that you're doing to help people break free from that and find a healthier route forward. We all want to live in healthy bodies. I think there's more of an awareness of that than ever. So where can people find you at Plant-Based Health? Is it a dot? Oh, I guess we can't from Canada, but we might have listeners from the UK. Oh, and one other question too, is it connected at all to the NHS?
And not at the moment, it is not. So it is a paid service, but hopefully in future we can actually, once we have seen enough clients, we can go to the NHS and take that to them, because I think that's where it is needed, isn't it? So yes. No, I mean, people can find me on my own website, and I have written quite a lot of articles. I have a video project. I have my own website as well.
What's your website?
It is Plant Power. No, it's actually, my website is actually drleiladehghan.com. It is, my social media handle is different. So yes, that is my website. They can find, about the projects I'm involved in. I did a video project recently, so they can find all of that on my website. But yes, if anybody, I'm not sure about Canada, but in any other country wants to actually connect and book a consultation, that would be plantbasedhealthonline.com.
All right, Leila, thank you. DrD.com. DrLeilaD.com.
D.com, yes.
Right. Okay. And thank you so much. Is there anything that you wanted to say as we leave?
No, just thank you very much for having me. I'm really glad that you could, you gave me the opportunity to talk about these issues, because they are really close to my heart. And, I think once you have seen the changes, in your health, when you adopt a healthy vegan diet, a plant-based diet, then you want to share it with other people. You want to make sure that other people who suffer from the same problems, can actually hear the message and make the changes and live a healthier life. And it is good for our health, for the planet, and for the animals, obviously. So win-win.
It's a win-win, absolutely. Thank you so much. It's been lovely to meet you.
Thank you.